General Hospital spoilers reveal that the moment the first whispers surface suggesting that Faison might still be alive, the entire foundation of everything in Port Charles began to shift, not with the explosive force of an immediate revelation, but with the slow, crushing inevitability of a storm building far off the coast. What started as fragmented suspicions quickly hardened into something much more dangerous. Confirmation. One by one, the key figures connected to Faison's last known operations stepped forward with evidence, memories, and instincts strong enough to pierce through denial. Anna was the first to admit that what she saw during her hallucination was not simply a trick of the mind. There had been something too vivid, too familiar, too real about the presence she encountered. Britt was next, trembling as she confessed that during her time collaborating with Sidwell and Cullum, she had come across research, files, and coded directives that pointed to a horrifying possibility. Faison had been the end goal of the Cold Fusion Resurrection Project. And then there was Jocelyn, whose trauma at Windermere had sharpened her senses instead of dulling them. She recognized patterns in Cullum's behavior and the strange preparations she witnessed, signs that someone powerful was being preserved or reconstructed, signs she did not have the courage to voice until now. Their combined confirmations created a ripple that became a wave that crashed directly into Jason and Dante with undeniable force. For years, they believed their worst nightmare had already been buried, that Faison's death had brought an end to a legacy of madness, cruelty, and manipulation. But now the truth loomed over them like a shadow. Resurrected Faison was not only alive, he was being engineered into something far more dangerous than before. This realization did not simply shake them, it rewired their instincts. Jason, who had always relied on precision and control, felt an unfamiliar urgency coiling inside him, pushing him into motion even before the plan was fully formed. Dante, usually grounded by caution and procedure, sensed the collapse of logic around them and understood that the situation demanded something beyond police work or tactical precision. It required alliance. It required trust. It required the merging of strengths that had once been kept separate by circumstance. As the three women's testimonies converged, Jason and Dante found themselves confronting the inevitability of a new mission, one that was bigger than the WSB, bigger than Sonny's network, and bigger than any past confrontation with Faison. This was not just about stopping a criminal. It was about preventing the rise of a threat engineered through science, coercion, and obsession. The Cold Fusion Project, once dismissed as theoretical madness, had revealed its true purpose through the fragments Britt risked everything to share, the recreation or revival of a man whose legacy had haunted generations. And if Sidwell and Cullum had succeeded even partially, the world they knew was no longer safe. Jason understood the weight of this before anyone else. Every instinct in him screamed that action was needed, not tomorrow, not after full confirmation, but now, before the remnants of Faison's influence manifested into a force that could no longer be contained. Dante felt the same pull, though his understanding carried a different tone, rooted in responsibility, in the fear of what would happen if Rocco, his own son, became another victim of the forces manipulating the WSB from the shadows. The knowledge that Cullum had threatened the boy only sharpened Dante's resolve, turning his fear into determination. Together they formed a pact unspoken but stronger than any contract. They would investigate, infiltrate, and destroy whatever Sidwell and Cullum had built before it fully awakened. Their alliance marked the beginning of a new dynamic in the war, forming beneath the surface of Port Charles. Jason brought experience facing the darkest fragments of Faison's legacy. Dante brought intelligence training, WSB knowledge, and an instinctive understanding of how these hidden factions operated. And between them grew a rare, powerful synergy, two men shaped by loss, sharpened by trauma, now unified by a threat that demanded absolute cooperation. Meanwhile, Anna, Britt, and Jocelyn became unexpected pillars supporting this new mission. Anna's deep-rooted history with Faison gave context and insight no file could provide. Britt's knowledge of the scientific objectives behind the project provided the blueprint for what might be coming. And Jocelyn, though shaken, offered details and observations no adult would have noticed. Details that revealed just how close Cullum had come to unveiling the final phase. of the resurrection program. Slowly, a new structure began forming, one consisting not of fear, but of strategy. What had begun as scattered confirmations transformed into a coordinated effort to expose and dismantle the monstrous plan Sidwell and Cullum had been cultivating in the shadows. Every revelation fueled Jason and Dante further, pulling them deeper into a war they had not chosen, but now fully embraced. As they pieced the truth together, they realized something chilling. If Faison was indeed alive or close to revival, everything that had happened in the past few months, the attacks, the disappearances, the manipulations, the coded messages, were not isolated incidents. They were preparations, movements, warnings. And now, with the knowledge brought forward by Anna, Britt, and Jocelyn, Jason and Dante stood at the threshold of the most dangerous mission of their lives. They no longer questioned whether Faison was alive. The only question that remained was whether they could stop him, and the men trying to bring him back before the world around them changed forever. And with that realization came the birth of a new alliance, one forged not by choice but by necessity, one destined to alter the fate of Port Charles in ways none of them could yet comprehend. After all, anything connected to the WSB has already moved far beyond Sonny's day-to-day understanding, hasn't it? Sonny knows how to run an empire. But this new threat is not born from rival territories or mob politics. It rises from laboratories buried under false identities, from agents whose loyalty has been sold to science, from ghosts like Faison who refuse to stay dead. That is why every new piece of information Britt shares only pushes Jason deeper into suspicion, deeper into fear, deeper into the chilling possibility that Anna is not missing, she is being held. And if Anna is still alive, somewhere inside the maze Sidwell and Cullum built, then the responsibility to bring her home does not fall on Sonny's shoulders. It falls on Jason and Dante, the two men who understand both the darkness Faison left behind and the new madness rising slowly, deliberately, mercilessly to take his place. The moment Britt's quiet warnings sink in, a new adjustment begins forming, not just in Jason's mind, but between him and Dante. Their shared duty transforms into something sharper, heavier, and more necessary than ever before. They are no longer simply investigating, they are preparing for war. A war that demands cooperation instead of hierarchy, instinct instead of protocol, raw courage instead of the illusion of control. The threat is evolving, so they must evolve with it. The danger is adjusting, so they must adjust faster. And beneath the surface of every calculation lies the same unspoken truth. They are not protecting Port Charles as a territory or as a mission, they are protecting the people they love. Jason thinks of Sam, Danny, Scout, Michael, and the pieces of his life that have been rebuilt from ashes more times than anyone should endure. Dante thinks of Lulu, Rocco, his father, and the heavy cost of carrying a badge in a world where the rules no longer apply. Both men feel the tightening fear that if they move too slowly, if they misread one detail, if they underestimate Sidwell or Cullum, the people closest to them will pay the price. The enemy is not simply organized, it is obsessed. Obsessed with cold fusion, obsessed with pushing human limits, obsessed with reanimation, obsessed with resurrecting a monster who was never meant to return. And that obsession is starting to burn through the city like a fever, unstable, unpredictable, consuming. Sidwell's obsession with perfecting Faison's final project, Cullum's obsession with control and punishment, Britt's lingering obsession with the guilt of helping them, Anna's obsession with the trauma Faison carved into her life, and now Jason and Danny's obsession with stopping it all before it destroys everything they care about. These obsessions collide and ignite something new, something dangerous, something that cannot be undone. Jason feels it first, an old instinct waking inside him, the part of him that once hunted the darkest men with cold precision. Dante feels it as well, the fear of losing control mixed with the responsibility of doing what must be done, even when it breaks him. Their minds begin shaping new strategies, burning through old assumptions, fusing their strengths into a single purpose: infiltrate the network, find Anna, expose Sidwell and Cullum, and ensure that whatever remains of Faison, whether memories, DNA, or resurrected flesh, never touches the world again. The shift in their thinking becomes the first sign of a much larger adjustment. Beginning across Port Charles, the WSB's secrets are no longer contained. Britt's confessions are no longer isolated. Anna's disappearance is no longer an accident. Everything is connected. Everything is accelerating. Everything is tightening into a noose of science and vengeance that now encircles Jason and Dante in equal measure. And as the two men step deeper into the threat, the entire situation begins to cook at the edges, rising to a dangerous heat where every choice becomes heavier, every second becomes sharper, and every decision could mean the difference between saving the people they love or watching them vanish into the same shadows Anna was swallowed by. Jason adjusts to the new reality by reverting to his oldest instincts: silence, precision, focus. Dante adjusts by balancing his badge with the truth. Rules cannot save anyone from a resurrecting madman. Together they form an alliance neither planned, but both now depend on. A bond forged by urgency, responsibility, and a shared understanding that this time they are not fighting a living man. They are fighting an idea, a legacy, a resurrection, a threat that refuses to die even when the world demands it. And in that boiling tension where fear sharpens judgment, where obsession fuels action, where new calculations shape every breath, Jason and Dante become something neither Sidwell nor Cullum ever anticipated: the unstoppable force standing between Faison and the world he intended. Sidwell and Cullum were no longer merely dangerous men chasing power. They had become architects of something far more unhinged, something built from the remnants of Faison's legacy and twisted into a weapon designed to break the world open. Every decision they made, every encrypted command, every experiment hidden behind layers of WSB corruption pointed to one intention: to harness the lingering strength and psychological terror of Faison, and wield it as a force no agency, no government, and no individual could stand against. Their new calculations were not born from logic but from obsession, the kind of obsession that grows roots in the human mind and refuses to loosen its grip, even when everything begins to crumble. As their project intensified, the atmosphere in Port Charles grew heavier, stranger, crackling with a sense of incoming disaster that only a few people could feel: Jason, Dante, Britt, and the silent ghost who connected them all. Jason had faced death, betrayal, captivity, and the darkest parts of himself, but nothing compared to the nightmare rising now. He could sense the shift long before Britt confessed the truth, long before Dante pieced together the inconsistencies in the WSB files, long before the first testimony confirmed that Anna's disappearance was not an accident, but part of a calculated design meant to draw him into the war Sidwell and Cullum wanted to unleash. The two men were using Faison's DNA, memories, patterns, and neural imprints as the blueprint for a new weapon of control. And Jason knew that once such a monster was created, it would target the people Faison always obsessed over: Anna, Robin, Britt, and anyone connected to them. That knowledge became the spark that ignited Jason's instincts and pulled him into a battlefield where science, revenge, and madness collided. Dante felt it too, not through instinct, but through dread, through the sinking weight of realizing his world was shifting beneath him. He had joined the police force to protect the innocent, but he had never imagined the villains he would face would include resurrected war criminals, rogue agents, and scientific experiments buried beneath layers of classified operations. When Britt finally whispered the last piece of the truth that Sidwell and Cullum intended to extract and amplify the darkest parts of Faison's mind to build a weaponized intelligence system capable of predicting, targeting, and controlling human behavior, something inside Dante snapped. He understood that this was no longer a rescue mission, no longer an investigation, no longer a matter of justice. This was a fight for survival against an enemy who existed on the edge of human understanding. Together, Jason and Dante stepped into a new kind of partnership, sharpened by urgency and stitched together by the fear that Anna was running out of time. Their obsession with finding her grew fiercer with every clue, every coded transmission, every abandoned lab that hinted at the horrors she might be enduring. The search for Anna became more than a mission, it became a psychological anchor, the single thread holding Jason's stability in place, and the single thread preventing Dante from losing himself to the terror of what they were uncovering. When they finally traced Sidwell and Cullum to an underground WSB facility, buried beneath layers of false identities and encrypted entry routes. They knew they were walking into the center of a storm that had been building for years. What they found inside was worse than imagined. Fragmented recordings of Faison's voice, restructured through artificial processors, medical diagrams mapping the evolution of a consciousness that should have stayed dead. And at the heart of the labyrinth, a reinforced containment room where Anna was held in a semi-conscious state, trapped in a cyclical hallucination engineered from Faison's memories. The moment Jason and Dante found her, everything inside the facility shifted. The alarms, the lighting, the countdown protocols, as if the building itself recognized that its greatest secret had been breached. Jason carried Anna out of the chamber while Dante covered their escape, and for a moment the entire operation trembled, as though Sidwell and Cullum were watching their masterpiece crumble. Saving Anna should have brought relief, but instead it unleashed a new shockwave. Because as Anna opened her eyes, disoriented and terrified, she whispered one sentence that froze both Jason and Dante where they stood. "He's awake." That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment they realized Faison was not a possibility, not a theory, not a fragment of the past. They were already too late. Sidwell and Cullum had succeeded far more than anyone expected, and the nightmare they feared was no longer rising. It was already here, and its first move had not yet been revealed.